Emperor Palpatine's contempt for Darth Vader's lightsaber went far deeper than aesthetics or combat preference. To the Dark Lord of the Sith, that crimson blade represented everything wrong with his apprentice: lingering Jedi traditions, psychological weakness, and dangerous independence. After examining Canon and Legends sources, this documentary has discovered 8 critical reasons why Palpatine despised the weapon, spanning ancient Sith philosophy, galactic politics, the rule of two, and the systematic erasure of Jedi culture. Ancient Sith philosophy had a controversial view about lightsabers. According to the most powerful dark side masters, these weapons were tools for apprentices, not true lords of the Sith. This was a core belief about what separated masters from students, about what it meant to achieve genuine supremacy in the dark side. Yet the greatest practitioners believed authentic power flowed directly from the Force itself, requiring no physical conduit. The reasoning cut deep. A lightsaber remained a physical object vulnerable to loss, damage, or theft. It demanded constant maintenance, rare kyber crystals, and years of training to master. But the Force was infinite and eternal. A Sith who relied purely on the Force could never be truly disarmed. They could attack from any distance, defend against any threat, and adapt without drawing steel. More critically, dependence on a weapon revealed inner weakness. For Sith doctrine, which prized strength and absolute self-reliance, this dependence was failure. A true master needed nothing but raw power, channeled through will alone. Palpatine had studied these ancient teachings extensively during his rise to power. In the expanded universe, sources including Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader reveal that Sidious felt he and his Sith predecessors had outgrown the use of lightsabers. According to this account, he continued carrying them primarily to mock the Jedi by defeating them with their own signature weapon. This wasn't mere preference, it was a calculated ideology about what true Sith power should be. Throughout his reign as Emperor, Palpatine embodied this philosophy completely. He rarely carried his lightsaber in public view. Most Imperial citizens never knew he possessed one. To them, he was the political leader who had saved the Republic from Jedi treachery. The weapon remained hidden, reserved for those rare moments when he needed to demonstrate his personal capabilities. When Palpatine revealed his combat abilities, the results were devastating. His confrontation with Maul and Savage Opress on Mandalore showcased exceptional blade work, moving with speed that seemed superhuman even by Force user standards. In expanded universe sources, including Jedi vs. Sith: Essential Guide to the Force, Sidious is documented as having mastered all 7 classical lightsaber forms. Yet these displays served as statements of superiority rather than evidence he needed the weapon. Palpatine's true preferences lay with the Force itself, with abilities that dwarfed what any blade could accomplish. By the time he revealed himself as Darth Sidious, he had evolved far beyond the limitations constraining other Force practitioners. While the Jedi focused on traditional combat and lightsaber forms, he delved into the deepest secrets of the dark side, studying forbidden techniques they would never touch. Yet Vader never embraced this philosophy. Despite decades of training under Palpatine, despite countless demonstrations of the Emperor's Force mastery, despite explicit instruction about the nature of true power, Vader remained deeply attached to his Crimson Blade. He carried it constantly, maintained it with obsessive care, and relied on it as his primary instrument of enforcement. The weapon never left his side, but Palpatine's disdain for Vader's lightsaber went beyond mere philosophy. Every time that Crimson Blade ignited in public view, it carried a weight the Emperor couldn't ignore. The weapon spoke to millions across the galaxy, triggering memories and associations Palpatine had worked tirelessly to destroy. What made this particular lightsaber so dangerous wasn't just what it represented to Vader, it was what it meant to everyone else. The Jedi had built an entire culture around these weapons, and Palpatine had nearly succeeded in erasing that culture from existence. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi had carried lightsabers as symbols of their role as peacekeepers and guardians. These weren't just weapons designed for combat, they were powerful cultural and political symbols representing justice, hope, peace, and protection of the innocent. When citizens across the galaxy saw a Jedi ignite their blade, they knew help had arrived. The weapon had become synonymous with Old Republic ideals, a physical manifestation of the promise that the strong would protect the weak, that justice would prevail over corruption. The lightsaber's design reflected these values perfectly. It required years of disciplined training, demonstrating its bearer had earned authority rather than seizing it through force. It could defend without killing, deflect blaster fire to protect innocents, and showcase the wielder's connection to the Force in visible ways. Unlike blasters anyone could use, a lightsaber demanded training, discipline, and Force sensitivity. But Palpatine recognized this immense symbolic power the moment he began orchestrating his rise to absolute authority. His strategy for seizing control required destroying not just the Jedi themselves, but everything they represented in the consciousness of trillions. The lightsaber, as their most visible and recognizable symbol, had to be eliminated from public life completely. It wasn't enough to kill the Jedi, their symbols required corruption, their memory required systematic rewriting. This drove Palpatine to stage the public incineration of captured Jedi lightsabers shortly after declaring the Empire. According to the first issue of the Darth Vader comic series from 2017, the ceremony was carefully orchestrated propaganda. Grand Vizier Maz Amedda personally threw hundreds of confiscated weapons into an enormous incinerator constructed on the steps of what had been the Jedi Temple. The ceremony took place before a massive public audience on Coruscant, with Palpatine and the newly christened Vader watching from within as kyber crystals exploded in bursts of blue and green light. The Empire declared the Jedi had betrayed the Republic they swore to protect, attempting to assassinate Chancellor Palpatine in a treacherous coup. Their weapons would be destroyed to symbolize the permanent purging of corruption. This wasn't just about eliminating dangerous tools, it was about creating an entirely new narrative where the very symbols of the Jedi became objects of shame rather than pride. Among the lightsabers incinerated was Yoda's own blade, the Grand Master's weapon carried by the being who had led the Order for centuries, was publicly destroyed along with hundreds of others. The message was unmistakable. The Jedi were gone, their greatest champions had fallen, their legacy had become literal ashes. Yet destruction extended far beyond this single ceremony. According to Tarkin, Palpatine ordered systematic raids on every known Jedi temple, outpost, and facility across the galaxy. Imperial forces swept through Jedi enclaves, seized archives, and confiscated every artifact. Any lightsaber discovered was either destroyed immediately or locked in Imperial vaults. The goal was absolute eradication. The Emperor understood something basic about civilizations. Symbols inspire action in ways pure force cannot. A child who glimpsed a lightsaber might dream of becoming a Jedi. An oppressed citizen might remember that the Jedi once stood against tyranny. Through relentless propaganda, lightsabers underwent a systematic transformation. What had symbolized hope now represented corruption. In the expanded universe, sources including the Revenge of the Sith visual dictionary note how Palpatine's own lightsabers were plated in electrum, the same rare material Jedi Council members like Mace Windu and Yoda used to mark their status. Yet Sidious covered his hilts with even more electrum than the Jedi ever employed, turning their symbol of wisdom into a cruel mockery. However, there was one glaring contradiction Palpatine couldn't eliminate. Here was Vader, the Emperor's own enforcer, carrying a lightsaber openly for all to see. True, it glowed red rather than blue or green, a clear visual distinction marking it as corrupted. True, Vader used it to enforce Imperial will and hunt Jedi survivors, but the fundamental form remained identical. Every citizen who saw that crimson blade made subconscious connections to the Jedi, triggering cultural memories decades of propaganda couldn't erase. Palpatine had worked tirelessly to remove lightsabers from galactic consciousness, yet his apprentice kept one alive at the very center of Imperial power. The process through which Vader acquired this weapon would reveal everything Palpatine feared most about his apprentice's broken psyche and his inability to fully sever ties with his past. Darth Vader's lightsaber was not given to him. He had to take it through violence, then corrupt it through suffering. Shortly after his catastrophic transformation on Mustafar, Vader received his first task as a Sith Lord: hunt down a surviving Jedi and claim their kyber crystal. This wasn't simple battlefield salvage, it was a ritual called bleeding. where a Sith pours concentrated rage and pain directly into a crystal structure until it turns red. Yet, what should have been a straightforward test of Sith strength reveals something that deeply troubled the Emperor. According to issues 2 through 4 of the Darth Vader comic series from 2017, Vader tracked Jedi Master Karak Infilla to the river moon of Al-Dalim. Infilla had survived Order 66 by taking the bearish vow, cutting himself off from the Force entirely. Their first confrontation ended in humiliating defeat for Vader. The Jedi Master threw him off a cliff into churning waters below, but Vader repaired himself in those dark depths through sheer hatred. He returned and employed tactics that would have horrified his former colleagues. He breached the dam protecting Ambalar City, unleashing a catastrophic flood on thousands. While Infilla used the Force to save drowning civilians, Vader seized the opening. He force-pulled Infilla's lightsaber mid-rescue, then killed the exhausted Master. Palpatine then sent Vader to Mustafar with explicit instructions documented in the first issue of the Darth Vader comic series. The Emperor ordered him to corrupt the Kyber crystal, to teach it pain and anger, to make it bleed. And the location was no accident. The same world where Anakin Skywalker had burned. Palpatine chose Mustafar to force Vader to confront his trauma without escape. On Mustafar, Vader began the bleeding ritual. As detailed in both the 5th issue of the Darth Vader comic series and the Ahsoka novel, the crystal fought back with unexpected ferocity. It showed Vader visions of what could have been. The crystal offered redemption. He saw himself defeating Palpatine, reconciling with Obi-Wan, and reclaiming his identity. Most powerfully, he saw a future where Padme lived and they raised their children together. The crystal screamed through the Force as it was violated. Vader rejected the visions. He poured every ounce of suffering into the crystal. The resistance finally broke. It bled red, permanently corrupted by Vader's pain. Palpatine watched this process with mixed feelings that would shape his view of Vader's weapon forever. The raw power was impressive, but the Emperor recognized something troubling beneath the surface. Vader was using the ritual to cling to pain rather than transcending it. A true Sith Master would channel emotions without becoming defined by them. This wasn't strength, this was weakness wearing the mask of power. The weapon itself became evidence of Vader's incomplete transformation. Where Palpatine had shed his past identities like discarded skin, Vader remained shackled to his. In the expanded universe, Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader reveals that when building the hilt, Vader consciously tried to create something novel, but the resulting weapon was little more than a black version of his first Jedi lightsaber. Even attempting to forge something entirely new, he couldn't escape his past identity. This created a significant problem for Palpatine that went beyond mere symbolism. Vader's lightsaber, soaked with intensely personal trauma, became a tool of potential self-determination. It represented autonomy, the ability to channel pain into something he controlled independently. Palpatine feared anything that might rekindle Anakin Skywalker's spirit of independence or give Vader ownership over his fate, separate from his master's will. Yet, this personal connection was only part of what made it dangerous. The lightsaber represented something even more threatening to Palpatine's carefully constructed hierarchy of power. It symbolized the ancient Sith tradition that every apprentice must one day challenge their master. And in that crimson blade, Palpatine saw the instrument of his own potential destruction. The Sith Rule of Two, established by Darth Bane 1,000 years before, created inherent tension in every master-apprentice relationship. According to both Darth Bane Rule of Two and The Phantom Menace, only two Sith could exist at any time, one to embody power, the other to crave it. Apprentices were expected to eventually overthrow their masters through mortal combat. This was how the Sith evolved across generations, ensuring each iteration grew stronger than the last. Palpatine himself had killed his own master, Darth Plagueis, while he slept. He expected Vader to eventually attempt the same betrayal. It was tradition, inevitable, built into the core of their relationship. Every time Palpatine looked at Vader's lightsaber, he saw the instrument of his potential demise. In Sith tradition spanning 1,000 years, apprentices typically struck down masters in lightsaber combat rather than through poison or treachery. The duel proved beyond question who deserved to lead. Vader's Crimson Blade represented his potential to fulfill this role, to become the master by destroying the one who had created him. Palpatine had left Vader weakened by his injuries on Mustafar, never pursuing the most advanced healing techniques that might have restored him completely. The life support suit, the cybernetic limbs, and the constant pain all serve purposes beyond medical necessity. Palpatine never fully healed Vader because a fully restored Vader might have become strong enough to challenge the Emperor successfully. The physical limitations kept his apprentice controllable, dependent on Imperial technology, and weak enough to ensure Palpatine's continued dominance. Yet, despite these constraints, Vader had become one of the galaxy's most dangerous duelists through sheer determination. His mechanical limbs gave him superhuman strength. His mastery of Form V made him nearly unstoppable in single combat. The suit's bulk actually aided his fighting style, providing massive weight behind each strike. The Emperor couldn't decide if this adaptation was admirable or terrifying. Palpatine's response was calculated. He trained other darkside enforcers as potential replacements, keeping multiple options available should his primary apprentice prove disloyal. In the expanded universe, sources document how Palpatine maintained Emperor's hands, darkside adepts, and various other Force-sensitive agents. Critically, none of these enforcers were true Sith. Palpatine held to the code of only two. They received darkside training but were not privy to Sith teachings. In established continuity, the Inquisitorius served a similar role, hunting surviving Jedi, but kept weaker than Vader through limited training. Their existence sent a clear message. You are replaceable. If Vader failed to measure up or overreached his position, others waited to take his place. The lightsaber became the physical symbol of this power struggle. When Vader drew his blade in Palpatine's presence, the gesture carried multiple meanings both understood. It signified service and loyalty, but it also represented a potential threat. Yet Palpatine's concerns about Vader's lightsaber extended beyond succession and betrayal. The weapon represented something that troubled the Emperor on an even more practical level. Vader's reliance on the blade revealed a tactical limitation that frustrated Palpatine endlessly. While the Emperor had mastered the full spectrum of darkside abilities, his apprentice remained stubbornly dependent on a single tool. This philosophical divide would eventually lead to a brutal lesson in the depths of Coruscant's industrial district. The practical differences between Palpatine and Vader's approaches to power revealed deep disagreements about what made a Sith Lord truly dangerous. Palpatine's mastery of the Force was comprehensive, versatile, and genuinely terrifying in its scope. He could unleash Force lightning against multiple opponents, each bolt controlled to inflict maximum pain or instant death. His telekinesis allowed him to hurl massive objects or crush enemies at a distance. His ability to cloud minds and foresee threats made him nearly impossible to surprise. In the expanded universe, the Dark Empire comics detail how Palpatine wielded Force storms capable of destroying entire Republic fleets. He had orchestrated the Clone Wars through manipulation and foresight. He had destroyed the Jedi Order through political maneuvering backed by Force abilities that clouded their perception. He had seized control of the galaxy without most citizens knowing he was a Force user. This was the apex of Sith power in his conception, reshaping civilization through darkside mastery rather than physical combat. Yet Vader, by stark contrast, often fell back on his blade and brute strength when confronting problems. When rebels needed elimination, Vader drew his lightsaber and cut them down personally. Palpatine viewed this approach as limited, the tactics of a warrior rather than a true Sith Lord. This philosophical divide extended to their combat styles. In the expanded universe, sources including the Jedi vs. Sith Essential Guide to the Force document that Sidious mastered all 7 classical lightsaber forms. More significantly, Palpatine integrated Force abilities seamlessly into battle. His confrontations involved blade strikes combined instantly with Force lightning, telekinetic attacks interrupting rhythm, and mental assaults creating psychological openings. Against Maul and Savage Opress on Mandalore, he moved with supernatural speed that made him appear to blur. Vader's approach was constrained by physical limitations and psychological preferences. His fighting style was built around Form 5's Gemso variant, which emphasized powerful counterattacks and overwhelming strength. According to multiple sources, including the Jedi Academy training manual, Vader had been a Form 5 master since his early Jedi days. Gemso suited his cybernetic abilities perfectly. but this optimization made his combat approach heavily dependent on the lightsaber as the primary weapon. A training duel demonstrated this principle with brutal clarity. Issue 25 of the Star Wars comic series from 2020, published in July 2022, depicts Palpatine challenging Vader to sparring in Coruscant's Works District. When the duel began, Vader relied heavily on Form 5 technique. Palpatine easily overpowered him by combining lightsaber strikes with devastating force attacks. Lightning forced Vader back and disrupted his breathing apparatus. Then, precision blade work pressed forward. Telekinesis destabilized his footing. Then overhead strikes exploited the imbalance. Vader couldn't match this versatility. When the duel ended with Vader defeated, his suit sparking from damage, Palpatine delivered his lesson with cold clarity. The Emperor emphasized that lightsabers were not the real tool of the Sith, but the dark side of the Force was. The lesson was unmistakable, but Vader never fully absorbed this teaching. Part of the problem was practical. The Revenge of the Sith Visual Dictionary states in expanded universe sources that Vader's artificial arms prevent him from conjuring Sith lightning. In established continuity, the 5th issue of the Darth Vader comic series from 2017 shows Vader generating force lightning during the bleeding ritual, but the energy feedback nearly kills him by short-circuiting his life support systems. Either way, Vader cannot safely use the signature Sith ability that Palpatine wields so effectively. Yet, Palpatine suspected the deeper limitation was mental rather than physical. Vader had become the most feared duelist in the galaxy through Form 5 mastery. This success created powerful resistance to change. The Emperor believed combat should function as psychological warfare first, with physical confrontation secondary. Vader's approach was direct. He overpowered enemies through superior technical skill and raw strength, without the complex layers of psychological manipulation Palpatine valued. Every time Vader ignited his lightsaber rather than relying purely on the Force, it reminded the Emperor that his apprentice was thinking like a warrior instead of a Sith Lord orchestrating galactic strategies from the shadows. But Palpatine's contempt for Vader's weapon extended beyond combat philosophy. The lightsaber itself, the Kyber crystal at its heart, represented a connection to something the Emperor had worked tirelessly to corrupt and control. The Jedi had treated these crystals as sacred for thousands of years, and Palpatine had plans to corrupt that sacred tradition in ways that would horrify anyone who understood what Kyber truly meant. The Kyber crystals that powered lightsabers represented something profoundly sacred to the Jedi Order across thousands of years. These weren't ordinary minerals, they were living crystals naturally attuned to the Force itself, resonating with the light side. Jedi younglings would undertake sacred journeys to crystal caves on frozen worlds like Ilum as core parts of their training. This pilgrimage was deeply ritualistic. Each youngling had to find a crystal that called to them through the Force, forming a personal bond. The relationship was a partnership rather than ownership. Palpatine recognized the symbolic importance immediately. To destroy the Jedi legacy at its foundation, he needed to corrupt what they held sacred. When Palpatine ordered Vader to bleed a Kyber crystal, he was forcing him to violate everything the Jedi had revered. The bleeding process was traumatic. According to the 5th issue of the Darth Vader comic series from 2017 and the Ahsoka novel, the natural crystal would be tortured with concentrated dark side energy until its nature was shattered. The crystal didn't submit passively, it resisted with all the strength of its light side connection. The red glow that resulted wasn't simply a color change, it was visual proof of corruption. A crystal permanently bent to purposes it was never meant to serve. The blood crystal screamed through the Force when activated, its agony audible to anyone Force sensitive enough to hear. However, Palpatine's corruption went far beyond individual lightsabers. The massive Kyber crystals forming the Death Star's super laser represented the ultimate expression of his philosophy. Jedi symbols transformed into weapons of planetary annihilation. According to Rogue One and Catalyst by James Luceno, the Death Star's weapon was powered by 8 enormous Kyber crystals, each larger than a human being. Their combined beams focused into a single blast, capable of destroying entire worlds in seconds. This was Palpatine's vision realized, taking what the Jedi considered most sacred and perverting it into the ultimate instrument of terror. The Empire's exploitation was systematic and ruthless. On Jedha, one of the galaxy's most ancient Kyber sources, and a holy city for Force-worshipping religions, the Empire deployed massive mining operations. Issues 40 through 43 of the Star Wars comic series show the Empire continued strip mining even after the Death Star's attack on Jedha City, deploying Continent-class crawlers to extract every crystal. The violation of Ilum was even more complete. The ancient Jedi world fell under total Imperial occupation. The Empire carved massive sections out of the planet itself, exposing its molten core and creating an artificial equatorial trench that destabilized the world's entire geology. What the Jedi had revered as holy ground became an Imperial mining operation stripped of all spiritual significance. This represented Palpatine's complete inversion of Jedi philosophy. Where Jedi saw Kyber as living crystals deserving respect, the Empire saw raw materials. Where Jedi formed bonds, Sith dominated through bleeding. Where Jedi lightsabers protected life, Imperial Kyber weapons destroyed it on planetary scales. Yet, the dependence bothered Palpatine philosophically. True Sith power should be completely independent and self-sufficient. In the expanded universe, ancient Sith traditions spoke of manufacturing synthetic crystals through alchemical furnaces and dark side rituals. According to Shadows of the Empire, Sith like Darth Maul worked constantly for days to create crystals, growing artificial stones imbued with dark side energy from creation. But by Palpatine's era, bleeding captured Kyber had become standard. This meant even Sith lightsabers remained defined in position to Jedi tradition rather than existing independently. The Sith were still operating within parameters established by their enemies, corrupting rather than creating something new. Vader's weapon exemplified this problem perfectly. The blood crystal had been completely corrupted, but remained a Kyber crystal, the same type of living stone Jedi had revered for thousands of generations. Yet corruption of Kyber crystals was only one dimension of Palpatine's contempt for Vader's weapon. The Emperor's disdain also stemmed from how Vader wielded the blade itself. While Palpatine had mastered every lightsaber form as a psychological tool, Vader remained stubbornly devoted to a single combat philosophy. This rigid approach to dueling would become another source of tension between master and apprentice. All of Palpatine's specific objections to Vader's lightsaber ultimately connected to his largest obsession, the complete eradication of the Jedi Order from galactic memory itself. The Emperor wasn't content with having defeated the Jedi militarily through Order 66. His true ambition was totalitarian. He wanted to erase them so thoroughly from history and culture that future generations would barely remember that they had existed at all, reducing 10,000 years of documented history to vague myths and discredited legends. This campaign began with a coordinated physical elimination combined with aggressive rewriting of historical records. According to Tarkin by James Luceno, the Jedi Temple on Coruscant was transformed within a single year into Palpatine's Imperial Palace. This wasn't a simple military occupation, it was a symbolic overriding of the Jedi's entire legacy with the seat of Sith power. The structure that at once represented hope became the Emperor's throne room, a place of fear and absolute authority. Jedi statues were torn down and melted for scrap. Meditation chambers were converted into interrogation rooms. Palpatine ordered the systemic destruction of every Jedi artifact across the galaxy. Holocrons containing wisdom from hundreds of Jedi Masters were shattered. Ancient texts were burned in ceremonial bonfires. Archaeological sites with any connection to Jedi history were bombed into oblivion. However, lightsabers received special attention in this cultural purge as the most visible symbols of Jedi identity. When the Empire staged the public burning of thousands of captured Jedi lightsabers on Coruscant's temple steps, they announced that the Age of the Jedi had ended. Yoda's ancient weapon was publicly incinerated as proof that even the greatest Jedi Master had fallen. The Kyber crystals exploded in bursts of blue and green light, visual confirmation that the Old Order would never return. Through Imperial education systems and relentless propaganda, the Emperor rewrote galactic history itself. The new official narrative portrayed Jedi as dangerous religious extremists who had betrayed the Republic through a violent military coup. Within a single generation, Palpatine calculated, children raised under Imperial rule would know only the official version. The Force would seem like a primitive superstition rather than a documented reality. Yet, standing at the center of Imperial power was Darth Vader, carrying a lightsaber for all to see. This created a contradiction Palpatine could never fully resolve. The Emperor needed Vader to be visible and feared. The Crimson Blade contributed significantly to that terror, but every time Vader ignited that blade in public view, he undermined decades of carefully constructed historical narrative. The weapon proved the Force was real, not an ancient superstition. It demonstrated that lightsabers still existed as sources of genuine power, wielded at the highest levels of Imperial authority. More problematically, Vader's public combat style kept Jedi fighting techniques in living memory. When he deflected laser bolts, when he moved with Force-enhanced speed, when his blade cut through blast doors and weapons alike, he was demonstrating the exact capabilities Imperial propaganda claimed were exaggerated myths. Military officers who witnessed Vader in action couldn't reconcile what they saw with what they'd been taught about the Jedi's supposed fraudulence. The irony cut deeper still. Vader hunted the last surviving Jedi using a weapon that was fundamentally Jedi in every meaningful way. True, the red blade marked it as corrupted, but the basic construction, the ignition mechanism, the distinctive hum, the characteristic glow remained identical to what Jedi had carried for thousands of years. The tool designed to protect the innocent now served to hunt its former wielders. Yet it remained recognizably the same tool. This created operational problems that extended beyond propaganda. Resistance cells across the galaxy drew inspiration from Vader's blade. If the Emperor's own enforcer wielded a lightsaber, then the weapons clearly possessed real power worth preserving. Underground groups worked to recover and hide captured Jedi weapons before Imperial forces could destroy them. They saw Vader's Crimson Blade as proof that lightsabers could be turned against their former masters, that the tools of the Jedi might one day return to serve the light. Vader's lightsaber made cultural amnesia impossible. As long as that Crimson Blade remained visible, it triggered connections to the Jedi that no amount of propaganda could erase. Older citizens remembered seeing Jedi carry similar weapons during the Clone Wars. They had watched Jedi defend their worlds with those distinctive growing blades. When they saw Vader's weapon, they couldn't help but remember what lightsabers had once meant, what the Jedi had once represented. Parents told children stories about the Jedi in whispers, using Vader's visible blade as proof that the old tales were real. The weapon became a reference point that kept oral traditions alive despite Imperial censorship. Generations who had never met a Jedi still understood what lightsabers meant because they saw one carried daily by the second most powerful figure in the galaxy. Every Imperial citizen who saw Vader's lightsaber made subconscious connections to the Jedi, triggering cultural memories that propaganda couldn't erase. Palpatine tolerated this contradiction because he needed Vader feared, but it also undermined the larger narrative of complete erasure. The weapon Palpatine despised most had become a quiet testament to the impossibility of erasing what the Jedi represented.